how is China a socialist economy with a market economy? How is China a socialist country with a market economy? For the following reasons. Socialism is defined by Frederick Engels as the anarchy of production. Or later, Frederick Engels, he says, under capitalism, I'm sorry, not socialism. Capitalism is defined by Frederick Engels as the anarchy of production. Frederick Engels also later describes it as saying that under capitalism, the means of production only function as preliminary transformation into capital. Meaning that if you have a factory that makes coats, it doesn't make those coats because people need to wear them. It makes those coats because it's profitable to make those coats. If you have a store that's selling computers, doesn't sell those computers because people need computers. It sells those computers because it's profitable to do so. And on top of that, people only have jobs if a capitalist can make profits from their labor, right? And you only work so long as a capitalist can make profits off of hiring you. And so we have an economy where profits are in command and the anarchy of production persists. And you get problems like, homeless people amid a huge amount of empty houses and housing units here in New York City. You get, poverty amid plenty. You get people that are hungry because there's too much food. You get people that are homeless because there are too many houses, because food isn't distributed because people are hungry. Food is distributed so that agribusiness and big box stores can make money from it. Housing isn't distributed because people need a place to live. Housing is distributed so that you can make money from it, right? And it's the rule of profits. Profits are in command. That's capitalism. China's economy does not work that way. There are a lot of for-profit corporations in China, but they don't have freedom. Those for-profit corporations have no rights. And at any point, the Chinese Communist Party can show up at those for-profit corporations and say, you do this, you do that, and they have no choice. They have to do it. On top of that, most of those for-profit corporations get a subsidy from the government. The Chinese government gives them money to tell them what to do. And on top of that, their primary business partner is the Chinese government. China has roughly 50% state-owned industries. Half of the industries in China are state-owned. Banking and the lending of money is controlled by the Chinese government. The Chinese government says this bank, lend to this person, lend to that person. And they have 5-year economic plans in China. 5-year economic plans where the government sits down and they say, what do we want to happen in the next 5 years? And they make a plan and they say, we need this to happen. We need the chips and computer chips section of the economy to grow. We need this many sewage facilities to be built. We need this much electricity. We need to expand our electrical capacity this much. We need this much railway. We need to pave roads in this area. They write a 5-year economic plan. And then the Communist Party, forces both the state sector and the private sector to enact the plan. That is not capitalism. And yes, there is a market. And yes, those market forces, those private companies make money. But they don't make money just doing whatever is profitable for them in the short term. They are controlled by the party. They are subsidized by the party. They are directed by the party. And their primary trading partner is the government. Huawei Technologies is the biggest telecommunications manufacturer in the world. It is technically a cooperative under Chinese law. It's a private company that engages in profit sharing, right, where the employees are shareholders, etc. But Huawei does not function according to the market. Huawei Technologies, its primary business partner is the military. The board of directors has members of the Chinese military that are on the board. On top of that, Huawei frequently is told, we need you to build telecommunications here, and they do it, right? So it's technically private. It's a market mechanism, but it doesn't function according to market laws, right? The logic of the market with its boom-bust cycle does not apply to China. And the reason for that is because of the fact that in China, the market is not in command. And this question from Tahuni: the rise of the USSR benefited labor conditions of U.S. workers. Why hasn't the rise of China had the same impact? Because of the fact that the USSR, when its economy was rising, the Western capitalist economy was in chaos. Well, actually, first of all, let me back up. All right. I'm sorry. My mind slipped there for a minute. So you're saying the rise of the USSR benefited the labor conditions of US workers. Why isn't the rise of China having the same effect? That's not exactly true about the USSR. The rise of living standards and the rise of the USSR's economy started in 1928. It was from 1928 until World War II that Russia, the Soviet Union, was having its boom of industrialization. At that point, living conditions in Western countries were decreasing. The Great Depression was happening, mass unemployment, people were starving on the streets, and conditions in the United States were deteriorating during that time. So that's not accurate, right? Now, there were, economic reforms that were won because you had a labor movement in the United States that was aligned with the Soviet Union. You had a labor movement and a communist party, and you had mass struggle in the streets and organizing against capitalism. Yeah, that was happening. But the actual basic conditions of the U.S. working class in the 1930s was not good, and it was getting worse throughout the 1930s. It wasn't until after World War II that living conditions in the United States went up, and that was because of the post-World War II economic expansion, which is the greatest episode of economic growth in all of human history. After World War II, every major city and every major country in the Western world had been destroyed by the war, and the United States had not been destroyed. So the United States industries had the monopoly, and they started selling steel to the whole world, selling cars to the whole world, selling refrigerators to the whole world. They were supplying the world with products, and U.S. industry was booming. And because of the fact that U.S. industry was booming and that you had a labor movement, so you had labor unions that could negotiate higher wages and force the bosses to pay higher wages, and you had a global economic expansion that was happening in the aftermath of the mass destruction of World War II, living conditions could go up. But that's not the situation that we're in today. Right now, we're facing a long-term crisis of overproduction, just like during the 1930s. And because of this long-term crisis of overproduction, living standards in the West are going down. Meanwhile, China, a country that does not have the boom-bust cycle, where technology does not lead to greater poverty, you don't have poverty amid abundance, right? That as technology increases, living standards in China increase, China is doing better. So really, this is comparable to the 1930s. During the 1930s, the Western capitalist countries were seeing their living standards go down, and the Soviet Union was seeing its living standards go up. That's what we're seeing right now. In the Western capitalist countries, living standards are going down, and in China, a socialist country, living standards are going up. So that's the issue there. It's comparable to the 1930s. Now, if there was some big war and, a bunch of the world got blown up and the United States didn't get blown up, I could see U.S. living standards start to go up again. We obviously hope that doesn't happen, especially because there'd be nukes involved this time. But yeah, that's the issue there. And then that was China related, so I thought I'd answer it.